This is my English language learner field experience reflection. My name is Courtney Miller, and this is for MEDU 620 Curriculum and Program Assessment. A quick introduction into where I came from and how I ended up with the field experiences that I chose. I graduated from North Central College in 2016 with a passion to join the field of education. I was hired at Morton East High School in Cicero, Illinois. For the past 7 years, I have gained a plethora of knowledge and experience working within a community that houses a population where 81.8% of the families speak a language other than English at home, according to the U.S. Census. Throughout my experience, I've worked with a multitude of student populations, such as students with IEPs receiving special education services and EL learners scoring at all levels 1 through 4 on the Access Test. With little training and no endorsement in aiding English language learners, I've worked with colleagues and school leadership a vast amount to gain information and strategies on the best practices to use within my classroom to support the variety of needs of my students. Specifically, working on the students' math content-specific language development has been a main focus of promoting success within my classroom. A brief description on the fieldwork I chose to engage in, starting off with the interviews that I was able to conduct. On March 3rd, 2023, I was fortunate to be able to interview Lauren Kepler and Deanna Martinez, who are two of the biliteracy coaches at Morton East High School. Throughout our conversation, I was provided with a range of resources and information about the EL and bilingual programs within the school. The first topic of conversation was about the EL standards and how those standards are used to guide instruction and programming for our learners. I gained a lot of insight in this realm. The coaches shared the resource that they use to lead their practices when working with EL students. The resource they use is titled Guiding Principles for Dual Language Education, and it provides information on the best practices in terms of curriculum, assessment, professional development, and involving family. After interviewing the coaches and spending more time diving deeper into this resource, it's evident that as a future school leader, there is serious need to cater to the needs of our EL learners in order to best serve their needs and increase achievement. One way to do this is to ensure that proper and formal professional development is being offered to our teachers. This led the interview into a conversation about how I can currently make a difference in the realm of the math department and address the needs of our EL students. At this point, Lauren and Deanna shared that they would love to collaborate on creating an action plan for developing PD opportunities for the math department in the building on how to incorporate EL strategies and scaffolds in the classroom. After a long discussion, we concluded that one way that this could be made possible is by collaborating with all the instructional coaches to provide an exclusive opportunity for the math teachers to participate in a series of lunch and learn PD sessions offered during their lunch hour. This is a plan that is still in motion and will hopefully be very successful when implemented prior to the end of this school year. In addition to talking to Lauren and Deanna about the EL standards and PD opportunities that could be offered, we talked about observing a biliteracy classroom or an EL classroom. In this discussion, they led me to the 4 principles to look for and provided me with a guide to utilize when observing an EL or biliteracy classroom. This is what the guide looks like, and it has 4 specific principles to address and look for when you're doing your observations. When you're doing this process, I love the wording glows and grows that you can identify when participating or observing one of your peer teachers. This is used later on in further opportunities that I chose to engage in for my field experience. So I did use this within the observations that I conducted as part of the 620 field experience. Furthermore, on February 28, 2023, I interviewed Ariana Gonzalez, the Morton East and Morton Freshman Center biliteracy coordinator. This is Ariana's first year as biliteracy coordinator. Last year, she was a Morton East Dean. As I asked her a few questions that I prepared prior to the interview, she shared that the EL population is large and still growing. Since the beginning of semester 2, there have already been 18 new students screened for services. We spoke about what the screener is and how this test qualifies students for EL services. She shared that most of the questions are low-level content-based, but high-level language-based, meaning that most students would be able to perform and achieve as long as they knew the language of English, which the test is posed in. Depending on when and how a student is introduced to the Morton East community, the school leaders can use the Access Test, a home language survey, and or the WIDA screener to assess a student's need for EL support. Further into the conversation, we approach the topic of what are the best practices for involving families of EL and bilingual students. Ariana shared that the current reality is that the language barrier between the educators and families is the biggest obstacle we must overcome. In order to overcome this, she suggests that the teachers reach out to the parent liaison for communication support. Another resource is to utilize our students' abilities of being bilingual to our advantage, seeking out students who are in NHS to translate during parent-teacher conferences, asking a current student to help you draft an email or sit on a phone call with their parent or guardian, or utilizing Google Translate to draft an email that can be sent in multiple languages are a few things that we could try. The best thing we can do in this position is keep the lines of communication open and consistent with support from those around the school. At this link, you'll see a summary of the questions I asked Ariana Gonzalez about the EL and biliteracy programs at Morton, in which I was able to summarize and link in a lot of really useful information to go back to and refer to when needed. In conclusion, the time spent interviewing the biliteracy coordinator and 2 coaches at Morton East High School has proven to be time well spent. As a future school leader, the support of our EL and bilingual programs at the school needs to be fully invested in, and the information gained from both of these experiences will lead me to make more informed decisions on how to ensure that the needs of our EL population are being met. For the next part of the field experience, I participated in a few observations. On January 25th and March 7th, I was able to observe a colleague during second hour to identify instructional practices in place that meet specific EL learning needs. With the Morton East High School population being characterized by 29% of the students being EL learners, most teachers have currently or have had in the past taught sections of courses labeled as EL sections. I have taught an EL section of college algebra trigonometry last year and previous years prior to that, and I currently still teach one section of EL learners in Integrated Math 3. Although this is true, I am not certified in EL, and thus I wanted to seek out experiences where I could gain insight on the best strategies to use within my classroom to support my EL learners. Dalton Elkins is a 7th-year math teacher who has taught EL and bilingual classes every year throughout his experience at Morton. He is one of the model teachers referred to throughout the building when seeking support for ELs. During the lesson, I observed Dalton work with students on a statistics-based lesson that focused on vocabulary. The goal of the lesson was for the students to identify the sampling type when given a real-world scenario. This is very language-heavy. To support his students, he provided word banks and translations for each given word problem. This helped the students to make connections between their first language and English in order to ensure the understanding of the material, but then also bridge them to being assessed in only English. Prior to the lesson that I observed, Dalton's students engaged in numerous activities to learn the vocab words, such as creating a vocab word wall, which was displayed throughout the current lesson, Overall, being a part of Dalton's lesson left me with a plethora of ideas to incorporate into my own classroom on the support that benefits EL students in the math class. After a span of about 6 weeks, I did return to Dalton's classroom to aid in a lesson during his second hour EL class. Throughout the lesson, I was able to gain hands-on experience of working with students who need serious language support. Most of the students in his class are EL 1 or EL 2. This lesson included a stations activity that allowed Dalton and myself to work with small groups of his students who were not currently performing at level in the math content being presented. This was an invaluable experience because I was able to be immersed into his methods of support and could take this involvement and practice directly back into my own classroom to support my own students. Furthermore, this will also lend itself into a future leader position because I now have a deeper understanding of strategies to attempt when using to work with EL learners and their families. Without hands-on experience in this realm, I would not feel confident the way I do now in order to utilize the tools when communicating with students and families who primarily speak a language other than English. I also had the opportunity on February 22nd to observe Katie Zale during her second hour class. I was interested in seeing this class because it's an integrated to bilingual section. I wanted to observe her class to investigate the differences between bilingual and ELL classes. As I partook in her class, I noticed she was primarily teaching her class in Spanish, whereas Dalton primarily taught in English and supplemented with Spanish only when necessary. This was interesting to observe because I had not known the structure prior to witnessing the two classes. On the right of the slide, you'll see some notes that Katie used during the class with the lesson that I observed. After the observation, she told me that all note sheets for her bilingual classes have the structure of providing both languages to aid the students in their understanding not only of the math content, but also trying to bridge them into using English throughout their content classes. Without the support, many would be unable to approach the content because they're not proficient in English. Katie has students that range from EL1 to EL4, whereas Dalton's students mainly are EL4s or EL Collab level. Overall, after being able to participate in the 3 classroom observations, I felt fortunate to walk away with a multitude of new ideas of effective instructional practices that meet the needs of our EL learners. In addition, I'm better able to differentiate between our EL and bilingual populations and the needs or structures in place to support both groups of students. As a future leader, this will be helpful when supporting students and teachers to meet the needs of all learners. The next experience I engaged in was the reality check. On February 7, 2023, all lead teachers and administrators met to discuss the current realities of the data in our school. The 4 assistant principals at the meeting took turns to present the group with the data, ranging from attendance rates, discipline referrals, counseling office visits, grades, and club/activity engagement, broken down by various subgroups of students within our building. Within this data, a major focus was investigating the lower performance and achievement of our EL students as seen by the assessment data. For example, as seen on the slide, the EL 1 through 4 and EL collaboration students present the highest number of failed courses. This would be the columns titled E and E star. Those are failing grades. During the meeting, we collaborated on investigating inequalities or disadvantages that we can identify on methods of assessing and supporting our EL community. Prior to this meeting, each PLT leader led their team to create an action plan on creating supports for EL students within each department that will benefit the general student population as a whole, but target the EL population. At the reality check meeting, the teachers and administrators took these ideas and highlighted the ideas that will support the most change and benefit for our EL learners. This process was done by engaging in a carousel activity that started with each lead teacher sharing at least 3 ideas from their PLT conversations on giant sticky paper and posting it around the room. After this was completed, each lead teacher was paired with one partner to engage in a carousel viewing of the ideas from every department. As the timer prompted, each pair would rotate around the room, discussing the best ideas and highlights from each department. To conclude, the principal let a whole group share out to identify the most effective practices seen overall. Leaving the meeting, it was determined that one major takeaway from this activity was that we need to address the needs of our EL learners by taking time weekly to do check-ins and goal setting to encourage our students to stay on track in every class. Thus, one of the key takeaways from this meeting was a list of best practices used or recommended by the lead teachers throughout the building for ongoing curriculum and instruction development to best support our EL learners that was shared with the whole population of the school, the educators. The next experience I engaged in was the Lunch and Learn. On February 16th, I attended an optional professional development opportunity offered by the instructional coaches at Morton East High School. We met in room 112 during fifth period, which is my lunch hour, to engage in conversation around evaluating our formative assessment feedback strategies. Using these three inclusivity factors. The three inclusivity factors are being open to students' interests, student needs, and student abilities. Attending to these three factors in the lens of assessment will ensure that we're celebrating student identity and culture within the classroom. This creates a more inclusive and responsive learning environment. To begin the session, the three instructional coaches passed out a blank piece of computer paper and a few markers and asked us to draw an A+ worthy tree. After being given about 3 minutes, we were asked to present our masterpieces to the group. As we did so, the coaches were openly critical of how unworthy our drawings were. This immediately changed the light tone of the classroom to one that was characterized by frustration and defensive reactions from the educators. This led the group to reflect on personal assessment practices in our classroom. Do we ever set unclear expectations and then judge the work that's being produced? This sparked great conversation among the group about the populations being taught at Morton East High School. Every teacher that attended this Lunch and Learn currently teaches at least one section of EL learners. For the remainder of the session, the group engaged in conversation about how the assessments being used within our classroom can be inefficiently designed for our EL students. The instructional coaches then provided information about creating transformational assessments instead of transactional assessments to bridge the inequities that are present. Transformational assessments include having a feed-forward approach instead of feedback. This means to focus on the positive aspects of the student's current learning achievements and using those achievements and talents to expand and move forward in the learning process rather than providing feedback on the work that was done incorrectly. One way to make this transformational assessment possible in the classroom is to allow student voice and choice in the assessment process. There are a plethora of ways that a student is able to show that they have learned the content intended to be learned. Allowing students to have the autonomy on how they show the learning will benefit the investment learners have in the content being taught, leading to greater levels of student learning and achievement. Overall, throughout this hour-long session of exploring the inequities of assessment of our EL learners, I left the session with a greater confidence that understanding of how I can adjust my assessments to better serve my current students. The final experience that I engaged in for the 620 field experience was further investigation into the Seal of Biliteracy test. After the interviews with Ariana, Lauren, and Deanna, I was highly interested in learning more about the Seal of Biliteracy as it was a common topic of discussion. I also felt invested about this topic because it's a chance to highlight and celebrate the amazing accomplishments of our dual language learners. Being able to fluently speak two languages is something that is of great talent and should be treated as so. The seal of biliteracy is something that I can promote within my personal classroom and further on into the future as a school leader in hopes of encouraging pride among our EL students. To further investigate this test and this process, I was able to first observe a set of seniors and miss taking the exam. This was interesting as it gave me insight into what is required of the students in order to earn the seal on their diploma. After witnessing some of the questions and processes required throughout the exam, I became interested in finding ways to support my students in being successful on the exam. At this point, I met with Deanna again to discuss the resources available, or resources needed, that could be shared with students about the preparation prior to taking the seal. She shared a few resources created in the lens of the mathematics classroom, specifically a mathematics menu that the students can refer to in order to work on ensuring that they are familiar with using mathematical language in their home language and English. The seal of biliteracy requires students have a certain level of language proficiency in each subject, both in English and their home language. The mathematics menu, which is linked in the PowerPoint and can be clicked on for reference, is one piece of creating a larger biliteracy portfolio. Deanna suggested students do this during their sophomore and junior years as a study method to taking the seal of biliteracy test. The test will earn them recognition on their high school diploma and potential college credit. The mathematics menu guides students through completing an activity in the realm of reading, writing, speaking, and listening, the 4 components on the seal test, under the umbrella of math content in both languages. This will help students build their language abilities in English and their home language to ensure that they pass the seal during their senior year. Furthermore, into the preparation for this exam, students should complete a full portfolio, which includes work in each content area to ensure that they pass the full exam and not just the mathematics portion. Overall, researching into the seal of biliteracy, I was excited to identify ways to celebrate our students for their amazing language abilities. As a future school leader, this is something that I would invest great time and effort in order to encourage the abilities and motivate our EL learners. Throughout the experiences above, I was able to reflect and gain a lot of great information in the realm of a future leader, specifically focused on data collection and professional development as 2 of the emphases that I focused on throughout each experience. For lesson number 1, or takeaway number 1, I focused on the professional development realm of supporting our EL students. Although I taught EL for the past 7 years, the field experience provided me with time to seek out further the processes, the successes, and the resources seen throughout Morton East High School in the realm of our ELs. I've learned a lot from this experience, and I engaged with over these 10 intentionally spent hours dedicated to this assignment. The first major takeaway I want to focus on summarizes the learning and growth I developed participating in the Lunch and Learn, the observations, and the interviews with the biliteracy program leaders. After reflecting on these experiences, I realized the immense need of providing professional development to the math department as a whole. The majority of teachers at Morton East have currently, or have in the past, taught EL sections of the math courses we teach. About 94% of the student population being Hispanic, even if the section is not labeled EL, there's a large portion of the class that speaks Spanish, at school and at home. The more support that we can provide for these students within our classes, to the general population and our specified EL population at school, the better off our students' growth and achievement will be. For this reason, my first goal sparked by this field experience is to collaborate with the biliteracy instructional coaches to offer PD during lunch hours specifically tailored to the math department. This PD will be focused on strategies and practices that will assure the success of students in all math classes. For example, creating a word wall or word bank pre-made that teachers can use in their classroom would be one resource that we could provide and would be widely used. To support this effort, collaborating with the coaches and utilizing sources such as Houghton, Mifflin, Harcourt, we plan to provide the basis of creating a PD opportunity for the department. A few strategies by Houghton are to: number one, use routines that break down word problems; two, focus on math vocabulary; and three, connect with familiar contexts. These three strategies specifically target language comprehension of our EL learners. In addition to these strategies, it's suggested that number four, we use sentence frames as seen on the slide. Number five, we create a low stakes conversation space. Number six, we use tools, visuals, models, and manipulatives. And number seven, collaborate with all colleagues. These four strategies target specifically the language production of our EL learners. Overall, being able to dive into the process of providing this time and space to the math department to further develop the skills and strategies that will encourage the best practices are being used throughout the department will provide me with the unique experience of creating and implementing PD as a future leader candidate. The second major takeaway I can identify from completing this field experience requirements is the importance of monitoring and encouraging our ELs to achieve high standards. Through the interviews, Morton East reality check meeting, and the exploration of the seal of biliteracy, it's evident that we need to consistently track the EL learner progress to benefit our students the most. The driving reason that this fact is true is because it will allow school leaders and other stakeholders to make more informed decisions about the needs and achievements seen within our population. Better informed decisions are always of benefit to all involved. The primary source I witnessed this data-informed decision process being present in was throughout the reality check meeting with all the school teachers, lead teachers, and administrators. After assessing the data that was taken from Skyward, our online grading system, the team of leaders worked to identify areas of need and continued to brainstorm best practices to implement in order to support and enhance where the needs were seen. With that being said, according to the Regional Education Laboratory Program, data-driven decision-making requires two essential components, each of which can be complex and multifaceted: technology tools and human capacity. Technology tools such as data warehouse, student information systems, instructional management systems, and assessment systems provide for collection, storage, analysis, and reporting of data, which we use Skyward to do. Human capacity or data literacy allows individuals and systems to inform and change practice or redistribute resources based on the data. In other words, if the technology is the what, the data-driven decision making, human capacity is the what's next. At my school, it's evident that the technology tools are being used to collect data. We have a lot of data to look at. This infers that the next steps that we need to take at Morton East are a more widely shared vision of the human capacity or the what's next. This is where I felt inspired to search for more on this topic. Through the interviews and analysis of the seal of biliteracy, it was evident that there are ways to take the EL data and to present it to all stakeholders to encourage students and educators to achieve more. The seal of biliteracy is a huge accomplishment to be earned on the high school diploma, and with the vast majority of our students being bilingual, educators and school leaders need to invest the time and effort to motivate our learners to strive to earn this award. Thus, my second goal inspired by this experience is not only to gather and share more data about our EL learners, but to push this process to the next level and provide all teachers with the reason to act on the data being seen in a positive push for higher achievement of all of our students. Finally, the way that this links to the leadership standards, focusing on the Illinois performance standards for school leaders. I was able to identify two specific standards that I felt like my experience related to. The Illinois Performance Standard for School Leader criteria applicable to my observations and conclusions from this field experience are Standard 2, Leading and Managing Systems Change, and Standard 6, Creating and Sustaining a Culture of High Expectations. First, when I considered Standard 2, it's evident that the opportunity for a school leader to collaborate with staff to allocate personnel, time, material, and adult learning resources appropriately is a major focus of what I spent my time engaging in through the field experience. My first major goal or takeaway from my experience was to initiate more professional development opportunities for the math department at Morton East, and I'm currently collaborating with the biliteracy coaches to make this happen. In order to ensure that the best practices are being used widely and throughout the entire school, educators need to feel prepared and confident in their abilities to provide for our EL populations. In order to ensure this confidence is felt by our teachers, it's essential to monitor the outcomes of the SIP and student achievement data with purpose of providing staff with the time and the resources to learn and grow through PD efforts to improve our student learning. Second, when considering Standard 6, it's evident that through the data collection and analysis, it's a major goal for my field experience to act upon upholding our EL students and EL educators to high standards and motivating high achievement for every student. As a school leader, we can accomplish this culture creation through a wide range of data sharing. At the reality check meeting, I was able to gain a large amount of insight into the current aspiration and achievements of our EL population. Prior to engaging in this field experience, I've never been presented with data like what was seen at the meeting. Through the journey of accomplishing my second goal, it would be necessary that the data is seen by all stakeholders, and it sparks the staff and students to bring a culture of high expectations and positive learning behaviors to be a major priority throughout the building. Focusing on the vast amount of benefits of being bilingual will encourage an environment that successfully develops the full range of our students' learning capacities. Having explored the benefits and opportunities of the seal of biliteracy, it can offer our largely bilingual student population a school. As a school leader, I would consider Standard 6 when addressing student data and acting on using that data to benefit the achievement of our students. Ultimately, the field experiences I was fortunate to engage with provided me with insight into topics that I actually previously assumed to be pretty knowledgeable on. After being humbled about what I don't know and being able to seek out different experiences through my school pertaining to our EL students, it was evident that I had a vast amount to learn and still do, and in order to improve upon and maximize my effectiveness as an educator and future school leader. With the large majority of the Morton East High School students being bilingual and a portion of those students being EL learners, it would be it should be a major school focus to support all the students in finding success and achieving high standards throughout our classrooms. Due to this, it's essential that EL teachers and students are put at the forefront of our school leaders' focus. Providing educators with professional development opportunities often and sharing data to encourage educators to act on the data in terms of the needs of our EL learners are two essential steps that will be of large focus in my role as a school leader. We must recurrently seek out resources and supports to utilize in all classrooms in order to provide the needs of our students for all students and their unique needs. Through this experience, I've gained an immense load of information, hands-on experience, and inspiration to ensure that the EL population of students and teachers are being held accountable for achieving high standards with the proper support from our school leadership at Morton East High School.